The night the city shut early. The rain lost interest in the sidewalks and began to fall straight through them. I was late. Not for anything important, that was the problem. When nothing is urgent, you let the world make decisions for you. The station kiosk rolled its gate down with a grating sigh. A fluorescent tube buzzed like a trapped fly. I should have called a cab. Instead, I jogged down the wet stairs, following the familiar smell of warm dust and brake dust, that metallic breath of tunnels. The screens above the turnstiles flickered. Last service. 0:32. It was 0:29. My pass didn't beep. Clicked. The gate opened anyway. On the platform, 6 people waited, all pretending not to be alone. A man in a paint-splattered jacket ate sunflower seeds and lined the shells in a neat row along the bench. A woman in a green coat kept her eyes closed, as if listening for a frequency the rest of us couldn't hear. A kid played a game with the sound off, thumbs furious. Overhead, a torn map flapped in the draft. I glanced up. The lines weren't right. Our city had 3 main routes, a loop, and a future extension that had never been built. This map showed 5, with a thin gray spur dropping below the river and curving into the old quarry district. The spur was labeled simply Delta. No station names. Just a triangle. That one ever run? I asked the sunflower man. He spat a shell into his palm, stared at it a long time like it held an answer. Depends who you ask, he said, and added the shell to the row. Headlights curved out of the black. The approaching train groaned like a ship dragging its anchor. A wind rose, old gum wrappers breathing for a second, and the tunnel exhaled a smell like wet stone. The train was wrong too. The city had updated the rolling stock last year. These cars were the older kind. Cream paint gone gray with age, bench seats, and those rubbery strap loops that always felt a little like skin. Doors coughed open. No operator in the cab. I stepped in anyway because everyone else did, and because the rain had started to sound like static. We scattered through the car. The PA clicked. Silence. Then the wrong chime. A 3-note descending interval I hadn't heard since I was a kid. The doors slid shut with a rubber sigh. The car lurched. We pulled away. The first 2 stations were normal, tiled names, pillars tagged with the same arguments about football and love. A man on the platform raised his phone, filmed us passing. The light strobed across his face and made him a century old. Then the 3rd station arrived without arriving. No name, no tile. Just a long, smooth wall where a platform should be, painted the color of old milk. In the reflection, the 6 of us were 7, and the 7th wasn't any of us. The kid paused his game. Yo! The woman in green kept her eyes closed. We didn't stop. We didn't speed up. The tunnel narrowed until the windows were a smear of concrete an inch away, then widened into black again. My ears popped like we dived. The PA clicked a second time. A voice leaked through, waterlogged. Next, Delta. Your map's busted. The sunflower man told the ceiling, but his hands folded the shells into his pocket. We entered a station that the city never funded and my childhood remembered anyway. The platform was clean. No gum constellations, no flyers layered into papier-mâché history. Benches bolted to the floor in a precise row. The ceiling arched like a throat. A single sign hung dead center, enamel white, letters hand-painted. Perfect. Delta. We stopped. The doors thought about it. Opened. No one moved. On the far wall, a poster curled at the edges showed a family waving at a train that had no doors. Arrive to yourself, the slogan said. In a font the city stopped using before I was born. The woman in green finally opened her eyes. They were gray, the washed-out color of sky between rain. Don't get off, she said, conversationally, like she was reminding me about milk. It's a terminus that never ends. The kid laughed with a sound he regretted immediately. Nah, I'm good. He stood anyway, pants hanging low, game stuffed into his hoodie pocket. He stepped onto the platform. His sneakers squeaked. He looked left, right. Where's the exit? Don't, the woman said and stopped, not because she changed her mind, but because the word had nowhere to go. The doors shut on him. He slapped the glass. It didn't ring. thudded like we were already underwater. He mouthed something. Could have been, hey. Could have been my name. I don't know why I thought he mouthed my name. The train jerked, ashamed of itself, and left the boy standing there, mirrored in the enamel sign until even his reflection let go. We rolled into the black again. The lights in the car dimmed, brightened, chose a compromise. No one spoke for 2 stations that didn't exist. When the PA clicked next, it sounded almost proud of itself. Last service has been extended. A beat. We apologize for the convenience. The woman in green laughed without liking it. We are not headed home. Where then? She shrugged. Under. Away. Back. Back where? She closed her eyes again, like we bored her. Ever gotten off somewhere that wasn't on your map and felt, for 5 seconds, like you remembered the place? The vending machine on the left, the tile pattern, the odd smell? But you'd swear you've never been. Deja vu, Sunflower Man said. No. She tapped the window with a fingernail. Ting. Det. The next station had a name, but no one ever taught the PA how to say it. The letters weren't letters. They were scratches. The doors held their breath. Didn't open. Something moved along the platform. I don't know how to describe it without sounding like I'm making a mess of metaphors. It was tall the way a shadow can be tall. It walked close to the car, dragging a long hand along the windows with a sound like a zipper snagging on a sweater. When its palm brushed my pane, the glass fogged from the other side, and I saw, for a blink, a mark left in the condensation. 3 vertical lines crossed by one. The woman sighed. He's counting again. Who? She tilted her head, as if listening to a station announcement only she could hear. The conductor. She smiled without joy. He's late for his shift. The PA clicked a 4th time. If you see something, say nothing. The chime played backwards. We rattled on. I tried my phone. No service. The clock app thought it was noon on a date my calendar insisted hadn't come yet. I opened the city's transit map to make myself feel better. The thin gray spur labeled Delta Fan wider, then replaced everything. The main lines shrank to ornament. The loop curled like a shed snakeskin. The spur mapped us. Put it away, the woman murmured. I did. The Sunflower Man snorted. This is stupid, he announced to the car, to the tunnel, to the rules. I'm pulling the emergency. He stood, grabbed the red handle in the vestibule, and yanked. Came off in his hand. He stared at it like the shell again, baffled by the comedy. Okay, he said gently and sat. The car rocked over points I couldn't see. A light ahead, not electric but chemical, bled green through the dark. The train sighed, as if relieved to have an excuse. We slid into a platform so narrow it had never been legal. Bare rock seeped from behind the tile. Someone, years ago or tomorrow, had chalked a single word on the wall at eye level. Remember. Half the letters had been smeared by hands trying to obey. The doors opened to air that tasted like washed pennies. I stood, not to get off, just to remind my legs we still had a contract. The woman's gaze pinned my coat to my ribs. Don't, she said almost kindly. Leaving is a way of staying. Then what do we do? She smiled a little, as if we'd finally arrived at the point of the game. We wait for him to come through. We pay what we owe. Who? The man with the long hand, she said, and closed her eyes again, retreating to the frequency where she'd begun. The PA clicked. Next. Memorial. The chime soft as a sigh. We didn't move. The lights stayed green. On the far end of the platform, something like wind turned the corner and became a man. He wore the old operator's coat, the one from the museum photos. Heavy navy wool, brass buttons, cap with a badge. His hair remembered black. His face did not remember anything. Where his eyes should have been, deep sockets glowed a wet mineral blue, and the light from them had weight. He held a punch and a strip of cardboard tickets that never ended. He didn't look at us. He didn't need to. He slid his long hand through the door that wasn't fully open and reached, with neat, practiced efficiency, toward where our chests were. The woman in green stuck out her wrist like a commuter. I have a pass, she told him, and turned her palm up. He took it anyway, gently like a doctor. He punched a hole in the air over her heart. She exhaled. Not pain. Not relief. Something like both. When he reached me, the smell from the tunnels rose, and there, tucked under it, a second smell I hadn't noticed in years. Warm corduroy. My father's coat, always damp from weather. The operator's blue light stuttered, as if seeing me jolted his internal wiring. No, I said, without knowing what I was refusing. Please. He tilted his head, and in the second of tilt I saw a throat torn up by smoke and a pair of hands trying to close a door against water. He didn't take my heart. He took something smaller. When the punch clicked, the sound had a paper fragility. The platform smelled like rain in a house where the windows don't shut quite right. Thank you, I told him, because the woman had said that was how the game worked. He nodded, a conductor taking a fare, and stepped off where the floor wasn't, disappearing into a seam in the air shaped like a service passage that no one had ever mapped. The PA woke. Mind the gap in your story. The doors closed with a louder seal. We moved. No one asked what he'd taken. No one offered. The sunflower man, finally, took a seed without spitting the shell. He chewed slow, eyes damp. The woman in green leaned her head back and cried as if she'd been taught privately how. I took my phone out because I couldn't not. The lock screen had changed. A photo I didn't remember taking. The quarry at dusk. A boy on the edge of the fenced-off drop, arms out like he could balance the whole city. His face turned, blurred by a run of rain on the lens. In the background, a sign, "No trespass. No swimming. No return." The battery icon said 3%, stuck like a needle on an old record. The tunnel widened. We burst into a chamber I never saw on news maps. A cathedral for trains. Arches fat with soot. Tracks splitting like roots. In the middle, a platform perfect as a stage. On the wall, a mosaic, tarnished gold and green. A river winding through a city that pretended not to know it. Tiny tiles missing in a line that looked, if you stared too long, like a wound. Delta, said the enamel sign again, and below it, a subtitle in a hand I recognized from a grocery list I'd kept for years and thrown away. The line that wasn't there. The doors opened. Not a command, but an invitation to a party you stopped attending before you were born. This time, we all stood. None of us stepped off. The PA, cheerful for the first time, chimed, "Service continues." I sat. The train did not move. The tunnel breathed. Behind the mosaic, something rearranged itself. A scrape of tile, the polite, patient knock of a knuckle against plaster. A whisper through grout that could have been my name. I didn't answer. I didn't have a name that fit here yet. The woman in green reached for my hand without looking and held it like we were strangers in turbulence. When the train finally left, it did so with the reluctant grace of an apology. I checked the map again. The spur had become a loop. The loop wasn't circular. It angled into a triangle that refused geometry. At its center, a tiny dot blinked. "You are here," it lied. I put the phone away and watched the tunnel for an exit that wouldn't look like one. We didn't pass the boy. We didn't pass anything I knew. We didn't pass through. We passed into. And somewhere above us, where the rain had forgotten the sidewalks, the city slept through a service advisory it would never read. The train ran slower now, like it was towing something heavy behind us. Not cars, something invisible but with weight. The air in the car thickened. It felt like we were breathing the same lung. The PA clicked. Next, memorial. All passengers, prepare. The word prepare hung in the stale air. No one moved, but the woman in green adjusted her coat. As if preparing didn't mean readying but remembering. "What's memorial?" I asked her. Her lips twitched. "The stop before you don't come back." The sunflower man laughed once. Not because it was funny, but because that's how you keep fear from cracking. "We've had about 3 of those already." She didn't correct him. The tunnel widened suddenly, walls pulling back until there was no sense of enclosure at all. The windows looked out into something that wasn't tunnel or open air. A huge cavern, lit by a pale shimmer that didn't come from lamps. Columns of stone rose in uneven rows, like grave markers carved by giants. Between them, water pooled black and still. Our headlights skipped over its surface and showed the faintest ripples. Not from the train, but from something else moving just under. We slowed further until the tracks seemed to creak. The station emerged without fanfare. No tiled name, no poster, no turnstiles. Just a long platform of rough stone. In the center stood a monument. It was a wall, 10 feet high, covered in plaques, each with a name. Some names I recognized from headlines years ago, people who'd gone missing on the transit system. Some I knew from somewhere smaller. The found flyers taped to lampposts, the names murmured by neighbors when they thought you weren't listening. I didn't want to check, but I checked anyway. There it was. My father's name. The date below it wasn't the day he died. It was the day he left for work and never came home. The woman in green saw my face. They put you up before you get here. The wall already knows. The train hissed like it was glad to stop. The doors opened. No chime. Just a long inhale of cold air. A man in a transit uniform. Not the long-handed conductor, but someone cleaner, younger, stepped aboard. His cap was pulled low, hiding his eyes. He walked the aisle without looking at us, stopping only at the sunflower man. "Time to step off," he said. "No thanks. It's not optional." They stared at each other for a moment. Then the sunflower man stood slowly. His pockets were heavy with shells. He walked to the doors. Just before he crossed the threshold, he turned back and looked at me like he was about to speak. But the uniformed man put a hand on his back and guided him out. The doors closed. The sunflower man didn't look angry or scared, just tired. The PA crackled again. "Departing memorial." As we pulled away, I glanced through the window. The sunflower man stood facing the monument, running his fingers over the plaques like braille. The uniformed man had vanished. Then the platform curved out of sight. We plunged into blackness deeper than before. The lights in the car flickered, not randomly, but in patterns like old film. In the flashes, the seats looked different. Older, then newer, then gone entirely, replaced by wooden benches bolted to the floor. The woman in green spoke softly, almost to herself. "Every stop you pass takes a piece. Sometimes it's memory. Sometimes it's something you never named." "And at the end?" I asked. She smiled faintly, eyes still closed. "At the end, there's no you left to worry about it." After Memorial, the ride felt wrong in ways I couldn't name. The train wasn't just moving forward. It felt like it was sliding through something softer than air, like fabric being pulled over skin. The tunnel walls were gone. Not widened, gone. Outside the windows was a void, deep and gray, like mist with no source. It didn't move or swirl. It just was. Somewhere in it, shadows hung, long, thread-thin shapes, swaying as if underwater. The conductor's door creaked open at the far end. I thought I'd see the long-handed man again, but this time it was someone else. A child, barefoot, clothes damp, hair plastered to her face. She walked slowly down the aisle, ignoring the woman in green, ignoring me. At the center of the car, she stopped and pressed her palm to the glass. A smear bloomed on the window, not from her hand, but from the other side. A larger hand pressed back against hers, fingers impossibly long, almost wrapping the whole pane. Couldn't breathe. She turned, finally looking at me. Her eyes were clouded, pupils milk white. "Don't stand when we stop," she said, voice steady, like a command she'd given many times before. "Why?" I asked. Her gaze didn't waver. "Because it's not the floor you think it is." Then she stepped backward and, without a sound, melted into the glass, gone, leaving only the faint outline of her handprint. The woman in green opened one eye and muttered, "That's new." The PA clicked on. Next, chasm. The gray outside darkened. Shapes began moving. Slowly at first, then faster, darting toward the train and away again. Some were human-sized. Some were the size of buildings. I didn't know if they were in front of us or 100 miles away. We slowed to a crawl. The void outside parted just enough to reveal Nothing. No platform. No station. Just a flat expanse of black stretching in all directions. The train stopped. The doors opened onto the blackness. No sound. No air. No anything. I looked to the woman in green. She didn't move. She didn't even blink. Out in the black, faint footsteps began to approach, though there was nothing to walk on. Slowly, shapes appeared, emerging like photographs in a darkroom. They looked human, but too thin, their limbs too straight. They stopped a few feet from the train. Then, as if pulled by a string, the man in the pinstriped coat, who had been sleeping a few rows ahead, stood and stepped off. No hesitation. No struggle. The shapes surrounded him. They didn't touch him. They didn't need to. He began to sink, straight down, as though there were water under his feet. When his head slipped under, the black surface closed like glass. The PA crackled. Departing chasm. The doors closed, and the train moved on. The gray void outside tightened again until the tunnel walls returned, but they looked different now, uneven like they'd been carved by hand. The bricks were damp and dark, some bulging outward as if something underneath pressed to get in. The train rattled harder, swaying left and right. The overhead lights dimmed until they were little more than weak halos. The woman in green finally turned toward me. "You've seen enough to know, haven't you?" I shook my head. "I don't know anything. I don't even know why I'm on this train." Her lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. "Then you're better off than most." Before I could press her, the PA clicked. "Next, downline." The way it said it, flat, final, made my skin tighten. The train began descending. I could feel it in my ears, in my stomach. The tracks dipped steeply, the hum of the wheels lowering into a groan. The lights outside weren't tunnel lamps anymore. They were occasional openings, revealing chambers lit by faint, reddish glow. Through one gap, I saw a massive space filled with rails leading nowhere, twisted into loops and knots. In another, I saw water falling endlessly into a pit that had no bottom. And then we slowed. The downline station wasn't like the others. It wasn't even a station. The train stopped in a cavern so big the ceiling was lost in shadow. The platform was a ledge of cracked concrete barely wide enough to stand on. Beyond it was nothing but depth, a drop so vast that the red glow below looked like embers in a furnace. Shapes moved down there, circling slowly. Some were the size of train cars. Others weren't. The doors opened. No one stood. No one except the woman in green. She rose smoothly, brushing dust from her coat. For the first time, she looked directly at me. Really looked, and I saw that her eyes were completely black. "This is where I get off," she said. "And where you keep going." She stepped out onto the ledge. The heat from below rose in a visible shimmer. Without hesitation, she walked forward and dropped. She didn't scream. The PA whispered this time, as if it didn't want to be heard. "Departing downline." The doors slid shut, and the train pulled away, leaving the ledge and whatever waited far below in darkness. After the downline, the train felt emptier. Not just because passengers were gone, but because the space they'd taken seemed erased. Seats where they'd sat looked unused, like no one had touched them in decades. Dust clung in perfect outlines where their bodies had been. I tried to remember their faces and found I couldn't. The gray void outside gave way again to tunnel, but now the walls were closer than before, brushing the edges of the train. Sparks flickered where steel kissed stone. The air smelled of ozone and something sweeter, like rotting flowers. The conductor's door at the far end creaked open. I expected to see the long-handed man again. Instead, the figure that stepped out was hunched, wrapped in an old black coat that dragged the floor. His face was hidden under the brim of a cap, but I could see his mouth. Too wide, lips pale and thin, stretched into something that wasn't quite a smile. He walked with deliberate slowness down the aisle, running one gloved hand along the seatbacks. Each time he passed an empty seat, the overhead light above it dimmed until it went out completely. When he reached me, he stopped. "Still riding?" he asked. His voice was dry, brittle, like paper tearing. "I don't know where this goes," I said. He tilted his head, and I saw more of his mouth now. the corners pulling farther than they should, teeth small and too many. No one does. Not until the end. He leaned closer. I could smell the rot on his breath. You could step off. Any stop. But you won't. Why not? His grin widened. Because you're looking for someone. My stomach turned cold. I hadn't told anyone. Not the woman in green. Not the sunflower man. Not even myself out loud. He tapped the brim of his cap. I see what the wall saw. Before I could speak, he straightened and turned away, heading back toward his car. The PA crackled. Next, final approach. The train shuddered, picking up speed. Outside, the tunnel split into 3, then 5, then more, twisting together, crossing, merging, so that I couldn't tell if we were following one or all at once. Somewhere far ahead, I saw a light. Not the pale station glow I'd come to expect, but something deep red, throbbing like a heartbeat. And with every mile, the sound of that heartbeat got louder. The red light ahead swelled until it was all I could see through the front windows. It didn't flicker. Pulsed, slow, steady, alive. The heartbeat sound grew so deep it rattled in my ribs. Every time it hit, the seats trembled, and the overhead straps swayed like pendulums. There were only 3 of us left in the car now. Me, a man I didn't remember boarding, hunched in the far corner with his face hidden in his hands, and the sleeping woman in a floral dress, whose chest didn't rise or fall. The PA came on, not with the usual flat voice, but with the conductor's own. Approaching terminus. Prepare for crossing. The words sent a needle of cold down my spine. Crossing to what? The tunnel around us began to change. The brickwork peeled away in strips, revealing not bare rock but something smoother, glistening. The rails themselves started to bend, just slightly, as if soft under the weight of the train. The man in the corner groaned, clutching his head. Too loud, he whispered. But I realized it wasn't the heartbeat he meant. It was something else, a sound under the sound. I strained to hear it. It was voices, dozens of them, hundreds, layered and tangled, speaking in whispers and shouts, overlapping until they made no sense. The red glow grew brighter until it painted the inside of the car like a wound. And then we saw it. The tunnel opened into a cavern so large the ceiling vanished into darkness. In the center was the source of the light, a sphere, suspended in midair, its surface shifting like liquid. Every so often, a face would press outward from inside it, mouth open in a silent scream, before sinking back beneath the surface. Rails led directly into its base. The train slowed. The heartbeat became deafening. I realized, with a sick lurch, that the sphere was breathing. Each inhale pulled the air toward it. Each exhale pushed it back warm and damp. The PA spoke again, softer now. Crossing in progress. Remain seated. The man in the corner began to stand, but the straps above whipped down like snakes, wrapping around his arms and dragging him back into the seat. The woman in the floral dress opened her eyes for the first time. They were pure white. She looked at me, smiled faintly, and said, "You're almost home." The train rolled forward, rails groaning under us. The sphere grew until it filled the windows, and then we passed through. Passing through the sphere wasn't like going through water or air. It was like being turned inside out. Not pain exactly, but a twisting, folding sensation that left me certain my bones and thoughts had swapped places. When it was over, the train was still moving, but the world outside had changed completely. The tunnel was gone. The rails stretched across a flat plain of pale, rippling ground, like skin under shallow water. Above us, the sky was black. Not nighttime black, but the kind you see when you close your eyes and press hard on them. Shapes drifted there. Vast, slow things, like jellyfish the size of cities, their tentacles dangling so low they nearly brushed the train roof. The passengers were different, too. The man in the corner now sat upright, his face smooth and blank where features should have been. The woman in the floral dress was gone, replaced by a dark, shifting silhouette in her seat. A shape that breathed but didn't have a mouth. I looked toward the front of the car and froze. The conductor's door was open. He was standing there, no longer hunched. His coat hung away from a frame that was impossibly tall and thin, and his cap was gone, revealing a head that tapered to a point, no hair, no ears, just that stretched, lipless mouth and eyes like pits burned into paper. "Terminus," he said, his voice filling the car without moving his mouth. "End of the line for some. For others, a beginning." The ground outside began to rise, forming a ridge ahead. At its peak stood a structure, not a station but something that might have once been one. The roof was caved in, the walls draped with sheets of black growth that pulsed faintly. The train slowed as we approached. I realized the ridge wasn't earth at all. It was a pile of shoes, thousands of them, stretching as far as I could see to either side. The train ground to a halt at the structure's edge. The doors opened. Warm, humid air rolled in, carrying the scent of wet rust and something sweeter. The same smell I'd noticed before, now stronger, almost choking. The conductor gestured toward the open doors. "If you step off, the train forgets you. If you stay, you forget yourself." I looked out at the ridge of shoes, the black-draped building beyond. Something inside moved, slow, deliberate, and I knew it had been watching me the whole ride. Behind me, the other passengers began to rise, one by one, stepping off into the heat without hesitation. Their shapes blurred as they walked, dissolving into the ground before they reached the building. The conductor tilted his head. Well, the air outside shimmered like heat haze, but there was no sun. Every instinct I had screamed not to step onto that ground. But staying in the car wasn't safe either. The seats around me were already emptying themselves, leather collapsing inward as if whatever had been sitting there had simply been erased. The conductor still stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame. "Choose," he said, not impatient, not unkind, just inevitable. I thought of the woman in green, her black eyes disappearing into the red light. I thought of the sunflower man, his face sinking into the window like wet clay. And I thought of the person I'd been looking for, though I could no longer remember their name. "Will they be there?" I asked. His mouth didn't move, but the answer was inside my head. "They are everywhere here, but never as you knew them." The hum in the walls deepened. The plane outside shifted, the skin-like ground tightening, as if the whole place were inhaling. I stepped toward the door. The conductor's shadow stretched impossibly long across the floor, curling toward my feet. I put one foot on the ridge of shoes. They were warm and some were soft, not from leather but from what was still inside. Something shifted in the black-draped building ahead. A doorway opened where there hadn't been one, spilling a faint red glow. I could see movement inside, slow, patient, waiting. The air grew heavier. My head swam. Behind me, the train doors hissed. I looked back. The seats were gone now, replaced by a long, empty corridor fading into darkness. Somewhere down it, faint and far away, was the heartbeat again. The conductor inclined his head, as if granting me a final courtesy. "You can ride forever," he said, "or you can find out what waits when the ride ends." I stepped off fully. The ground gave just slightly, like the crust of a thawing lake. The shoes shifted under my weight, and I sank an inch before finding balance. Each step toward the building felt heavier than the last, like the air itself was trying to hold me in place. When I reached the threshold, the red glow wrapped around me like warm water. Inside, the walls pulsed faintly, veins of light running through them like arteries. And there, in the center, was a single chair. Someone was sitting in it. I stopped breathing. They lifted their head. It was me, older, eyes darker, smiling just enough to hurt. "I've been waiting," they said. I took one step closer. The doorway sealed shut behind me.